Hi again, guys. All right, we are going to work on part 2 of our Mercury persona charts. So I pulled up a few different charts than I had yesterday. I had a few little ideas about some people that'd be really interesting to take a look at. So first of all, I pulled up Pablo Picasso. If you know much about Pablo Picasso, he's an artist, 20th century artist, and he was known for being a leader and a pioneer and sort of a rule breaker, a maverick of the abstract art movement. And if you're familiar with his painting Guernica, which was painted, I believe it's post World War I, maybe during World War I, frankly, I'm putting my art history degree to shame because I can't remember the exact date that was painted, but it was one of the first works. He's not the first abstract artist. There were other artists who were thinking about the same concepts as he was, but he was, for whatever reason, maybe because he's from Spain, and that is a country that's known for being sort of with bullfighting, and there's connections to blood and this idea of the connections to to violence and to war. So Guernica was a painting that was known for being, just go look it up. It's a very, frankly, it's an ugly painting. You have these abstract, dislocated, fragmented shapes sort of moving through this painting. Now, in his chart, his Mercury, his sun is in Scorpio, and it's in the 11th house. So Scorpio is an archetype that has to do with things like death and war, power, and those dynamics for good and for ill. The 11th house, of course, is our house of the community. So to me, this feels like whenever I see Pluto in the 11th or Scorpio in the 11th, or strong connections between those two archetypes, you have something big that is a collective event that everybody's just swept up in, right? So world wars, obviously, especially if you're a European, which was where that was the theater, then you were in the middle of it. And what's interesting is if you look at his chart down in his 4th house, opposite the sun, it's not exactly opposite by house, but down there's all this Taurus. And your 4th house, we're thinking, how did his sort of mind evolve, and where did he come up with his perspective on existence? Well, down the 4th, his roots. We have Aries right on the cusp, and then you've got Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, and Jupiter. They're all retrograde, and they're all in Taurus. So to me, that feels like, first of all, this is going to be a chart. These are going to be shared by anybody who was born in the 1880s, in the beginning of the 1880s, and the people that would have been adults during World War I. And so he's coming from a background where traditional conservative, sort of like Victorian values and whatnot, were moving through some big changes. And then we had like the Industrial Revolution. And so what this suggests to me is his roots and his family background are very much perhaps tied to that revolution. And with his family, I don't know much about his family. Saturn right down there in the 4th, next to Neptune and to Jupiter and Chiron. He obviously has some sort of tricky relationship with the mother archetype, like the great mother. Not necessarily, it could have shown up in his relationship with his mom, but it could also just be more the big archetype of femininity and what it means to be, and in particular, the mother. So Saturn here to me says he was conflicted when it came to having a wife. And I'm pretty sure I know that he had a younger, I'm not sure if they were husband-wife or if they were just partners for a long time, but I know at the end of his life he had a partner that was quite a bit younger than him. His sun is up there in the 11th. It's like it's completely launched off into the sky, opposite his roots, whatever he was taught growing up, which feels simple, not peasant-ish, but I don't know if he was poor. I don't know everything about Picasso, about his biography, but he himself had to go and had to be free to do the thing he came to do, that he was fated and destined to do, with it ruled by Pluto, Scorpio. So his mind is going to be one that is, people who have Mercury in Scorpio are, especially, he's at the end of Scorpio, so it's like the Piscean part of Scorpio. They're very much in the emotional waters all the time. A lot of times they're careful or cautious about what they share, what they actually say or write. They're very strategic. It's as though their minds are highly sort of attuned to other people and the psychological manipulations that other people sometimes can, how that can sort of play out. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like with his sun being in the 11th, he may have felt as though I need to, and also with all of this sort of juice down at the bottom of his chart with these planets that are more, Saturn restricts things, makes us in the fourth, can make us feel depressed, make us feel like our childhood, maybe it wasn't so, there was a lot of rules, or there was something about, our roots where we may not have learned to trust our feelings so much. And he may not have liked things that were traditional. I mean, obviously he was an artist who started out, he's got all these retrogrades, he started out as a sort of I don't know if he's an impressionist or where he was at exactly, but I've seen his artwork, his early artwork, and it's just like mediocre, it's not anything to write home about. And then you have this opposition to his son, so there must have been something in his life that launched him away from creating art that other people liked, and instead creating art that he himself felt compelled to create because he didn't have any other choice. So also, if you see his moon in Virgo in the 8th, moon in the 8th people have many times we are very concerned, or because I'm in the 8th, my birth chart, it's like our emotional security is wrapped up very much in where other people are at. Like we feel things off of other people really easily. And so many times we'll either just detach or hide how we're feeling. We'll misread people sometimes too, or know too much. And then, so his moon's in Virgo. And with that comes all of those, with Virgo, there can be, am I good enough? There can be the sense of, I need to do it. And so he's trining, his Taurus down in his 4th. So you can see why he maybe initially went off to, I think he even went to art school, I want to say. I could be wrong, but just you could go look up his early work. And that Virgo part that wants to do it the right way, and it wants to do it in a way that's acceptable. And I want to learn the skills. I want to learn how to paint the right way, with technique and with craft. Well, Moon conjunct Uranus, and also in the 8th house, also says that on a deeper level, he had a lot of shame, perhaps, or sense of dissatisfaction with himself, or perfectionism, that kind of thing, that he was meant to have to come up against and then liberate himself from through conjunct Uranus. Moon conjunct Uranus means emotionally, it's like when the muse is speaking, you act on it. So it can be very spontaneous, but perhaps it gave him fuel for his creative work, but also he may have had a lot of guilt or shame or that kind of thing that sort of played out for him. I haven't looked at his whole chart, and then if you also notice his Mars in the 7th, and it's in Cancer, I feel like there's something with his mother, with his childhood. If he saw his parents, there's not tough, difficult aspects here, but if his mother was just an important part of his story, that women are, there's a marriage to the wife here also. When you see Cancer in the 7th, the man's story is one that he has to choose between his mother and this other woman. So sometimes you see men who have multiple women, he's got Venus conjunct Mercury up in the 10th, and it's in Scorpio. So he very much loved his career, and he probably was a little bit of someone who wanted power, who wanted to feel like his works mattered. So ego stuff, definitely. And Pluto retrograde, Mercury retrograde, maybe at the beginning of his career, in the height of his career, he may have been quite ambitious and even greedy a little bit, and also, how he has that famous saying, this is the last thing I'll say on him, when he said, all art is theft. That is Mercury conjunct Venus in Scorpio, right? Up at the top of his chart, something he's known for, that he's known for taking other resources, out in the world, gathering, this is sort of 8th house, and assimilating other people's art, or other people's ideas, and perhaps even, I know he was friends with a circle of poets and artists and whatnot, so them all kind of collaborating and bouncing their ideas off of each other. I could see that for sure. So, okay, that's Pablo Picasso. Let's look at Henry Ford. So Pablo Picasso has an 11th house sun. The other person I will mention, I don't have it pulled up, but Kurt Cobain. I can't remember if I read for him yesterday, and I don't have his chart up, but he's also an 11th house sun. So remember, Mercury, your inner story, your inner dialogue, your inner voice about life and about what you're experiencing. So this feels to me, both of these men you can think of as, they may have both felt like they were different, they were outliers, that they were outsiders, and that their story was one that maybe they felt compelled to share. I know Kurt Cobain's Mercury is Pisces, so his is more tender. You know, his story is more of a wounded, more of a weakened, wounded story. Whereas Picasso is in Scorpio. And what's Picasso known for? He's known for being like this bull. He's known for being very sexual and powerful, and so and it's just interesting to see the difference. Now let's take a look at, let's do Henry Ford. Okay, Henry Ford, he's got his sun in the second house. So this, I've seen a lot of sun in the second house in the charts of people who are known for innovating. They're known for coming up with an idea that maybe not everybody else is agreeing with, but they're seeing the vision and they are holding onto it kind of stubbornly. So this can be a good thing or a bad thing. Now, we also, with Henry Ford, we've got his moon up in the 11th house. So emotionally, he's going to be someone who's driven by the excitement of, and it's also moon in Aries. So there's the pioneering spirit. There's also the inventing, the desire to solve a problem, I suppose, or come up with an invention or a solution that everybody can have access to. It was probably so exciting for him to imagine developing a car that anybody could afford. That's very moon in Aries in the 11th house, because it's like he's this hero, really, as an inventor and as a businessman. For him, it would have been more about the vision of the future and what that would look like with people driving cars. And he had enough determination and enough charm, Sun conjunct Venus in Leo, but also he probably was pretty proud and stubborn. And when he wanted his way, I wonder too, I don't know much about him either, so those of you who've read about him, great, but must have been a good salesman. Must have been someone, at least when it was his dream or his vision. Mercury in Leo in the third, to me, says he would think all types of workarounds to make something happen. And obviously we have like the assembly line. That's something that he kind of incorporated. He figured out how to build cars cheaply or quickly with the factory and the assembly line. So he's someone very important, obviously, for the American economy, ethos, history, whatever you want to say. And also he's Uranus rising, so Gemini rising, Uranus right there rising. So his mind was on lots of ideas. He was willing to try things. And just like Thomas Edison, who has, I'll show you him in a second, but first house, Aquarius sun, you know, this Aries, Aquarius, sometimes Mercury, you know, Gemini, those are our inventors and our pioneers. They're willing to try things that nobody else will kind of try because they can see a vision of the future and they want to get everybody to that place. And they have enough gumption, hubris, stubbornness to push something forward that they feel, at least in his case, that they feel will be useful for the public, which I think his chart's pretty cool. You should take a look at his. Martha Stewart now. So Martha Stewart I pulled hers up and I'm amazed at these persona charts. The more I'm pulling charts for different people, I'm just like, oh my gosh, you couldn't make it more appropriate. So Martha Stewart, the sun is 25 degrees of Cancer, the sign of the mother and the home. It's in the 10th house, right on the MC. So when you think of Martha Stewart, you think of someone who's like perfect. She is like buttoned up. She has in her books, she's all about these beautiful New England, you know, houses that are sort of like in Massachusetts, I suppose, Connecticut, I think is one of the places she lives. Wealthy, status, sort of, I mean, obviously, in order to have time to do the things that she does, like in her magazines or on her website, or I don't even know what she's got going now for her business, but her projects, you have to have money. And her homes that she's owned are gorgeous, refurbished houses from like 17th and 18th century that are up on a big piece of land, you know, just as beautiful and as perfect as you could imagine. So her communication style and the way she talks, she's very sort of stilted, stiff, rigid. That's the 10th, that, you know, it's kind of Capricorn, it's 10th house. It's just being worried about with it. In Cancer, it takes on this added layer of like, you know, it's tied into her moon in Virgo. in the 12th, right, in conjunct Neptune. So she has I don't know much about her childhood either, but this feels like someone who had, probably from a young age, a lot of dreams and fantasies about being rich, about being someone who, I know she was a model, someone who was willing to work very hard to have a life that she'd created for herself, and that she's very much the boss. Sun at the top of the chart on the MC. She is the boss. And it's in Cancer. So also she has Venus and Gemini here, and Jupiter conjunct Mercury and Cancer. So someone who really enjoys books and learning, and probably really enjoyed, I know she loves incorporating other cultures. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think she may have studied in school something that was either anthropology or archaeology, maybe English. I think it was something though where there was some element of sort of international studies or something in what she did for her schooling. I could be totally wrong. That's just me trying to remember from something I read randomly a long time ago. And then we have also Uranus and Saturn in her 8th. So, what happened? She ended up having to go to prison because of insider trading. That's also that's that moon, the moon conjunct Neptune in Virgo in the 12th, looking for security through maybe this fantasy that she had about wealth and creating and maintaining her status, with Saturn and Uranus over in the 8th, which are also squaring the nodes of the moon. So North Node in Virgo in the 11th is here to teach her to let go of, to liberate herself from the Virgo archetype of perfectionism, that belief that there is some exact perfect way to be. That's her story. Her story is all about the ego being, her identity, her name's on all of her stuff, right? Like Martha Stewart. Like she is this thing. And it feels like that's the thing she actually came here to maybe be freed from. So, okay, who else do we have here? Let's do Edison. Yeah, let's do Edison. So Edison is his Mercury persona chart, Sun in Aquarius, intercepted in the first house. And again, I'm just very quickly pointing out things that I'm seeing. You could analyze these in much more depth, of course. It's just to get you a feel. So with this, we've had Sun in Aquarius. We have an individual who is an inventive thinker. Anyone with Mercury in Aquarius, they like to think about things from a perspective that's like, well, how could we do this differently? How could we make this better? Or they like to think outside the box. Now, in the first house, there's the Aries archetype, Aquarius, Aries. And with that as well, you have a person he came up with so many crazy inventions. Like, I don't know if he patented all of them, but I know that he's known for creating, like, some creepy doll he created, like lots of weird things, along with inventions that we use in our homes, even I think to a certain extent to this day. So that to me is the Sun, and it's also conjunct Mercury and conjunct Neptune in the first. It's just prolific. And Uranus down in the 3rd in Aries. He definitely was someone who, Pluto there as well, feels like it's magnetic, like he just had an ability to sort of pull forward all these ideas and these inventions, and had just enough of that fire and that kind of electric storm. Electricity also would be something you'd be very interested in. Basically, he just was interested in the future. He was interested in seeing how things in the future could be different, could be improved, could be better. Moon is in Pisces in the 2nd, so there's that Pisces-Neptune theme, like Martha Stewart had that. There's kind of an element of the dreamer. You have to be willing to play around with different possibilities and the fantasies that you might have about, that lets you kind of sit back and close your eyes for a second and imagine a world. And within the 2nd house, it also feels to me like he enjoyed having a bit of control over his dream. And you got Moon conjunct Saturn. I think, didn't he build, or maybe it's Thomas Ford, or not Thomas, it's Ford, who built that little town where his workers all lived. It's different. Anyway, so yeah, that's about all I'll touch on for him for now. With Michelangelo. Now here's another, if you know anything about the artist Michelangelo, he's kind of a cantankerous person. He sort of kept to himself, a bit of a kind of a loner. And we don't know if he wasn't married. We don't know if he was heterosexual, homosexual, or just like a hermit. He may have just been kind of married to his art. So I thought he'd be interesting. And for him, we have Sun in Aquarius again. So there's that element of being a thinker. You're thinking about art in this case in a way that's outside the bounds of conventional thinking. And at the same time, he has his sun down in the 4th. So Aquarius and Cancer together, you have two archetypes that conjoin each other. So a person who has, just like, who was it yesterday? Didn't I read somebody yesterday that's like 4th house? I'm forgetting. Anyway, very personal. Your story, your understanding of the world around you is going to come from a place deep inside of you. It doesn't come from, well, I read this book and then I'm going to just parrot off the things I read from this book, or I am the one who, I'm the originator of the story, not anyone else. I also feel like it's really sensitive. The Mercury of this type of individual would be one that, even though it's an Aquarius, younger in age, when he's a child, a kid, he may have felt like his ideas were, because he loved inventions. He was quite, wasn't he a Renaissance man, right? So he had a very inventive mind and a prolific mind, but it like bubbled up from inside of him, and which of course is the case with inventors. His sun here also, you've got a square to Neptune the 1st, and he's a Scorpio rising. So the Scorpio rising, the people who have those fixed rising signs, there's determination. There's the secrecy, because Scorpio can have this element of holding things. There's a retentive quality a lot of times with Scorpio, similar to Taurus, but it's like when we have experienced people invading our space, or people like where we have to protect or be strategic about how we communicate, or we're just private and he's a hermit, Sun in Aquarius in the 4th. That's also like the hermit. So you can read it either way. Opposition to the moon in Leo up in the 10th. So he was probably someone who was pretty proud and found a lot of his identity and his sort of sense of emotional security through like the patrons that he had. He was able to, of course, work for the church, and of course he's an artist, which is Leo. But he's probably a pretty proud, difficult individual to communicate with. You have a Mars conjunct Pluto in the 11th as well, both retrograde. So they're in Virgo, and that to me says you have a perfectionist, someone who, it's great for a technician, anyone who's using, their hands to organize or to order the physical world. With it in the 11th, it almost has a feel of like, I wonder if he, when he painted, I wonder if he sort of almost channeled, like he which sounds kind of weird, but Mars conjunct Pluto to me, maybe he was an artist in a past incarnation. Perhaps he was someone also, though, that just didn't get along well with the public. Mars conjunct Pluto in Virgo just to me feels a little bit like, again, sort of the reclusive, there's a reclusive quality to it, probably because he was actually really sensitive to other people's opinions, got his feelings hurt easily, so his pride, really. So it was easier for him to just kind of keep to himself. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop right here. So hopefully this was interesting for you guys. We'll work on Venus next. And if you also over at the website, I have a sale right now. So I've offered the first 11 clients who sign up. I think it might be people may have already filled them all up, but those first spots are on sale. And then I also have a few spots available for the summertime that are going to be some of the last readings that I do this year. Might I haven't decided yet, but it may be the last year that I sort of offer readings as I sort of transition into book writing and content creation and that kind of thing. So, because I want to teach people. Okay, hopefully this was helpful, and hope you're having a great week. All right, bye-bye.